And then I'll
Okay,
start this as soon as you're done.
thank you. Okay, so tonight we were hoping to have Michele Goodwin as our speaker. But as you hear more about her and you watch this video, you're going to see who she is, and she's very busy. So with that, the ERA, they were able to have her on at their last meeting. So it was recorded and we got a copy of it. So let me just tell you real quick a little bit about Michele Goodwin. She's a professor at UC Irvine. She's also a lawyer, an expert in bioethics, constitutional law, family law, health law, reproductive rights, and torts. She is an award-winning author. She is an advocate for women, and she is a commentator. I apologize, and she does her own podcast. So, with that, we want to start the video. We hope you'll take some notes because at the end of the video, we'd like to have a discussion. She's going to touch on some really important issues that are important to us as an organization and as women. Okay, thank you, Liz.
These are dire times for us. I want to start by just one matter of housekeeping. Carol, how much time do I have? How much time should we set aside? Because I don't want to go over and I want to be mindful of your
As,
broader agenda.
yeah, as much as you would like. I'm sure you have another commitment. So what, 15, 20 minutes? What?
Okay, that works.
Okay.
That works. So, I want to first for us to be able to pause because if anybody is feeling frustrated, low, angry, depressed, motivated because of all those things, just know that I see you. This has been an onslaught. And if we don't pause to acknowledge what this onslaught has been, and it's not just been the week, it's not just this horrific mass murdering of children at a school where parents are wondering, wow, I left home a little bit early today and I didn't get the chance on that day to say goodbye to my child, and living with that pain and grief already. But it's not just that. We've just come through Buffalo and the targeting of African Americans on a Saturday afternoon, um, seeing people be gunned down who were seniors in that space, in California, not far from where I live in Laguna Beach, a shooting at a church. And then this is not even to account for the trauma that we've just experienced from January 6th through the beginning of the Trump administration, battling through um, the most horrific assaults on brothers and sisters from Asian American communities, children being locked in cages, having a government send lawyers from the Justice Department to argue in front of federal judges that children who are in government custody do not deserve toothpaste, that they don't deserve soap, and that it is completely lawful for us to feed them frozen burritos. Children snatched from their parents at the border, babies. Children denied the opportunity to even hug their siblings while being kept in separate cages. Muslim ban, folks having to show up in the middle of the night to say, we welcome you. This is not the kind of country that we are. And we will stand in defiance of a government that will separate people based on religion. I mean, all of that would have been enough. And add on to that, that we are still experiencing a pandemic that has disproportionately affected the lives of economically disenfranchised Americans, Black and Brown Americans, people on reservations, Indigenous folks on reservations, for whom being told to wash their hands frequently, as we all should, but where piping still does not extend to their homes. And to see 1 million Americans dead now from this deadly virus. And on top of that, a push for a racial reckoning after the brutal murders of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, these murders that were felt all around the world because of their depravity and cruelty. I mean, to even think that Breonna Taylor's death would have been skipped over, but for the fact that we all watched a video or knew that there was a video of a Black man who would die in the middle of a street with an officer pressing his knee on his neck until he could no longer breathe as he was crying out for his mother. And this not happening at 2 or 3 in the morning, but this happening in broad daylight with other officers watching and even participating over something that, if were true, is something that is a misdemeanor, which you get a fine for, which is passing a fake $20 bill. That actually is not something that gets someone the death penalty. It is actually a misdemeanor in the state of Minnesota. And so if all of that weren't enough, for each of you who are on this call, your journey into social justice, into feminism, into caring about civil liberties, civil rights, and what will come in our country didn't just start at the Trump administration. So you all were already thinking about these issues beforehand and trying to help others make sense of them and urging that people would pay attention. So when we're sort of thinking about it in this space of how do we feel, how do we process, how do we think about what the next stages are, it's not just Texas. It's not just Buffalo. It's not just the Trump administration. But I would say that really for the last decade, and of course these journeys go back even further, but really for the last decade, many of us have been really wrapping our minds around these issues and pressing for there to be greater attention and for us to have some victories in these spaces. And there have been some, but we have also felt the pinch and attack at a nation that seems to be asleep at the wheel of a car that is out of control and speeding downhill. And I wish that that were different, but I think if any time is the time for us to confront reality and that facts do matter. And despite what we've heard in recent times and of the last administration, that we can have multiple facts and multiple, sort of interpretations of, facts such that, the earth suddenly becoming flat, and that is a thing that people are believing, or the notion that Hillary Clinton was somehow detaining children in the basement of a pizzeria for purposes of assaulting them, right? Like these kinds of things, like, no, right? Like it's, we're in this space where we've been trying to get people to see a reality. And I think that that's really important. And I want to spend just a little bit of time talking about Justice Alito's leaked draft opinion, because it plays a pivotal role, I think, in how we come to think about the urgency of these times, the urgency of an Equal Rights Amendment, and the urgency of a third Reconstruction. So one of the things, and I'll start basically with the third Reconstruction and work my way back, I've been urging that really what this time calls for, if we could understand that the first Reconstruction was, as named, in the aftermath of the Civil War and the liberation of Black people and the liberation of our country from some heinous ass shit, if I could say that, right? Like, let's just be clear that the ending of slavery was also, let's end some heinous stuff, right? Who wants to be proud of selling their children? Who wants to be proud of seeing folks that look like your husband, but are brown shaded running around and they're about to be sold? And that happens to be the offspring of a 13-year-old Black girl who's kept in the backyard. Who wants to have that as a nation and on their consciousness? So the liberation of Black folks from slavery was also the liberation of folks from something that was egregious and absolutely shameful and heinous. But that led to our first Reconstruction. And that was the 13th Amendment, 14th Amendment, and 15th Amendment, that 14th Amendment being very central to Justice Alito's misinterpretation in this leaked draft opinion. But if we were to see a second Reconstruction as that period between the mid-late 1950s and the early 1970s, right, maybe like ending at 1970, where the Supreme Court began chipping away at all manner of those Jim Crow laws and laws that existed before Jim Crow. You know what I'm talking about? Those kinds of laws that were not just directed at Black people, although thousands of them were, right? Part of our sad intellectual or lack of intellectual history in our country is that, beyond thinking about Rosa Parks refusing to surrender her seat on a bus, Americans are really quite ignorant of the ways in which Southern states, the same states that Justice Alito says go back to the states, that these states crafted any number of laws to maintain a second class citizenship for Black folks. You can't play checkers in the park. You can't play chess in the park. You can't play billiards. You can't bowl. I mean, you're like, seriously, this is how you spend your time as a legislator, figuring out laws that deny Black people to be able to play billiards? You couldn't think of something better to advance the state of Mississippi, to advance the state of Alabama? Seriously, this is how you spend your time? But that period of the Second Reconstruction dismantled, through the Supreme Court mostly, many of those laws, and also through Congress, the 1964 Civil Rights Act, the 1965 Voting Rights Act, and even in 1966, the advancements in terms of Medicaid legislation, which denied then hospitals that received federal funding from being able to turn Black and Brown and Asian folks away. We had legacies of Black, Brown, Asian folks dying on the steps of hospitals that refused to serve them and served only white folks. And so that was a second Reconstruction, we could call it. But now we're in urgent need of a third Reconstruction. And I'll also say that second Reconstruction spent time paying attention to the concerns and matters affecting women's lives. I mean, let's face it, this is a country that had denied, where the Supreme Court upheld laws denying women from becoming lawyers, right? This is a country that denied, through the US Supreme Court previously, women from being able to serve on juries. This is a country that said, fine, that women should not be able to have credit cards in their own names, but have them in their husband's names. And we could go through a whole list of what has been upheld in this country, including laws that would shield men from punishment for the rape of their wives. Sadly, that stuff didn't fall until the 1980s. Or being able to beat their wives, such as the rule of thumb coming from beat your wife so long as the instrument you use is no thicker than your thumb. Well, a pause and a breath, right? To say that period of time, a second Reconstruction, but we know that neither through the first Reconstruction or the second Reconstruction did we get it right. And this is really a time of thinking about a third Reconstruction where we get it right. And when you think about it, women are in a far more dynamic position of political power than they ever have been in the United States. Still not great. You look at the World Economic Forum and we are way behind peer developed industrial, put air quotes around that, because what looks developed about our country, when if we look at maternal mortality rates, we're 55th in the world, and we don't keep company with Germany, France, Sweden, etc. We keep company with Saudi Arabia and countries where it's still legal to stone women, to publicly beat women, and to hang them. What looks developed in first world about that? We're a nation, we're in the deadliest place in the entire developed world to be pregnant, happens to be in Texas, Mississippi, Louisiana. What looks developed about that? But it is to say that we are at a time, even though we don't match up with peer nations in terms of women's representation in federal office, in courts, etc., but we are far more robust and beyond where we've ever been in the past. And so this provides the opportunity for reinterpreting, reimagining, rethinking, and recrafting what should be. And here it's not just an equal rights amendment. Let's think dynamically and broadly about all that needs to be stitched together and woven together. Voting rights still matter. This is a Supreme Court that not just through this leaked draft opinion shows us that it's ready to full-scale gut Roe v. Wade, Planned Parenthood v. Casey, and all the cases that came after that. Shame on Justice Alito for pretending that it's just Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood v. Casey, and ignoring that as recently as 2 years ago, this Supreme Court was upholding Roe v. Wade before Amy Coney Barrett came onto this court in June Medical v. Rousseau. This is not, oh, we're thinking a 50-year agenda and we've never thought about it in between. That's not true. The very last abortion case that Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg sat on before her death was just 2 years ago. And it is not just Roe v. Wade. It was 30 years before Roe v. Wade that there was Skinner v. Oklahoma, where the United States Supreme Court used language around human rights as protecting an individual's reproductive autonomy. So let me turn to this leaked draft opinion and how it fits with thinking about a third reconstruction that would handle voting rights more robustly, that would address LGBTQ equality, that would think about disability discrimination and how that stitches together across all of these areas. And let's also think about protecting our environment and much more. But the leaked draft opinion, I spoke about it in my congressional testimony and through a hearing last week that was 5 hours. I was one of several witnesses invited to testify before the House Judiciary Committee on the leaked draft opinion and also what Congress can do about this. Needless to say, and I know a number of you were able to watch this, it's been replayed on C-SPAN. It was a sad state of affairs, truly a very sad state of affairs. And in fact, it reflected this 98-page draft opinion. Now, a lot of attention was spent by members of the committee on how outrageous this is that there was a leaked opinion. But that was just a story. The story is the substance of it. The substance of it is the egregious omissions made by Justice Alito and those who would sign on to this draft opinion. The egregious attacks on still living members, people who have served on the United States Supreme Court. The kind of attacks that one didn't even see in the aftermath of deconstructing racial oppression in the United States. That is to say that if you read Brown v. Board of Education, you won't see members of the Supreme Court excoriating their colleagues who upheld laws that provided for slavery and Jim Crow. In this opinion, the kind of attacks that we see are really unheard of. But then there's the substance of it, the fact that Justice Alito cherry picks throughout history, calls the history that is referenced in Roe v. Wade irrelevant. But then Justice Alito decides that his own turn to history matters. And as you've already heard, his turn to history includes leaning into treatises that allowed for women to have no personhood, for women to be stuck in the position of coverture, which meant to be the property of their husbands, coverture being used as the foundation in American law to provide that husbands could be exempt from punishment for beating and raping their wives. These are the sources that Justice Alito decides are relevant to history. Justice Alito does the same kind of fabricating as Justice Thomas does with regard to race and abortion. Justice Thomas has been asserting in recent years that abortion has really been a plan of genocide against the Black community and that it has been eugenics. It is an outright lie, but what's also so egregious and stunning by it is that you see a kind of level of deep disregard and not playing on the fair field, same field when the Supreme Court refused to look in its own dossier. I mean, how can you say this, Justice Alito? How can you say this, Justice Thomas, when you look at the Supreme Court's history of eugenics and it involves a poor white girl? Buck v. Bell, 1927, has nothing to do with Black women. And you would think this is in your own backyard, Justice Alito. You at least would be as honest to your public as to cite appropriately to your own Supreme Court jurisprudence, Buck v. Bell, which tells us the story right within it, where Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes describes Carrie as a poor white girl. And he doesn't hold back. So this kind of fabricating this kind of race card playing, this kind of race baiting in order to kind of get individuals from Black and brown communities to say, oh my goodness, we shouldn't care about contraception. We shouldn't care about abortion rights because this has been a platform against us. And you can't help but think, how could you lie, Justice Alito? How could you lie, Justice Thomas? Because it's right within the Supreme Court's own jurisprudence that tells us how eugenics was formed in this country and who it originally targeted. Now, that is not to say that there wasn't coercive sterilization against Black women, against women in Puerto Rico, against indigenous women, because there was, but that wasn't the eugenics platform, right? So as you read that opinion, you see so many glaring errors and omissions, right? Including the fact that Justice Alito, and we saw this in the hearing last week, that Justice Alito refuses to engage an important fact. And that is, as I've just described, having a pregnancy in the United States is a deadly proposition, whether we like that or not. And it becomes even more deadly in the states that have the most prolific anti-abortion legislating that's taking place. I mean, nationally, Black women are 3.5 times more likely to die by carrying a pregnancy to term than their white counterparts. But if we pull back from that, any woman is 14 times more likely to die by carrying a pregnancy to term in the United States than by having an abortion. And the very subject of the Supreme Court's coming decision in Dobbs. In Mississippi, a Black woman is 118 times more likely to die by carrying a pregnancy to term than having an abortion. And I'll pause on that. 118 times. And you know where I get this data from? I get this from the Mississippi Department of Health. 80% of the cardiac deaths during pregnancy in Mississippi are Black women, right? You can't make this up. And the fact that Justice Alito writes in a nearly 100-page opinion, you will see nothing about maternal mortality except in one paragraph that relates to Roe v. Wade and maternal mortality in 1973. And that's it. You won't see anything about rape or incest, even though it is now a feature of these laws that there are no exceptions in cases of rape or incest. And it's all of that together that I think lets us know just how frightening these times are. And I'm going to conclude with this. In this leaked draft opinion, Justice Alito informs the American public that in order to resolve these issues, and if you don't like an opinion such as what the court is likely to deliver, what's delivered in this leaked draft, then take it to the polls. Just go and vote. There is a particular way in which this is a kind of knife to the gut. It's a kind of knife to the gut for anybody who understands the histories of voter suppression in this country. The legacy of voter suppression that has never ended in this country, with the exception of the Voting Rights Act, which has been dismantled in part by this United States Supreme Court. When I think about the urge to state that these issues shall be resolved at the state level, and that people who don't like this decision should just simply go out to vote, it reminds me of Fannie Lou Hamer famously getting the microphone at the Democratic National Convention and describing the horrors that she and other Black women encountered and endured when they tried to go to vote in Mississippi, being dragged off of a bus, being put in police cars, being beaten by sheriffs with batons. Fannie Lou Hamer describing how she tried to protect the leg that was weak because she had polio as a child, and how she screamed out and screamed out. And she concluded that testimony with saying, and all of this on account that we want to vote so that we don't we get lifted up from being second-class citizens. And to know that she's talking about the state of Mississippi, the same state which has enacted this law that this Supreme Court is weighing in on, and that Justice Alito would say, just go out and vote. In a state that was one of the last to repeal its miscegenation, these anti-miscegenation laws. I mean, all of the laws that we can imagine that when were real, that were horrible involving race, Mississippi was always the last to address those laws. And again, for this Supreme Court to say, just go out and vote, knowing, and I'll conclude with this, that in the time of Fannie Lou Hamer, Black people were subjected to having to guess how many jelly beans in a jar or bubbles on a bar of soap in order to be able to vote. And yes, it is true that there have been changes since that time. But we also know that we are living in a time where in the state of Georgia, you are not permitted to give anybody water or even a sandwich if they're standing in line to vote. In states that have pulled out polling places such that people cannot vote in their own neighborhoods and communities. In spaces where Black and brown bodies are surveilled and policed when they go into communities that don't look like them, and now those are the places where they're supposed to vote. I want to thank you, Carol, for inviting me to speak with the group today. I really appreciate it. I appreciate all that you all are doing. And let's all move not just for the ratification of the ERA, but for a third Reconstruction. And thank you all so much.
Wow. That's the third time that I've seen that. I saw it when she spoke live, and then I watched it myself, and then I've just watched it again. I hope that you were all moved and enjoyed it as much as I did. And I have a piece of what I think is good news. I've had her speak at a couple of groups over the past few years. And I just was able to read before our meeting started that she's going to be a visiting professor at Georgetown Law School. So when we have our meeting on November 12th, I would like to propose, as we set up our agenda, that if we can, we get her to come speak in person. She's just, I could listen to her all day. And the way she can just talk without taking a breath, whew, gosh, I guess she has a lot of practice at that. But so with that, we want to open it up for some Q&A. We can have a discussion basically, because I mean, she did Q&A with the ERA Coalition, but I said to Liz, let's just have our own discussion about a lot of the topics that she talked about, whatever you're passionate about, whatever you feel you want to talk about. So if you'll raise your hand, either electronically, you go under reactions, you can do that, or just hold your hand up and we'll call on you, and we would love to hear whatever your feelings are, comments, questions that we might be able to discuss, whatever it is. Okay, anyone? I know it's a lot.
Chambers has raised her hand.
Okay, Catherine?
Hi, everyone. Well, she was amazing and incredible, and thank you so much for being able to play that for us. She really synthesized a lot of information in a short time. But what I really appreciated was her focus in the beginning on how we were doing, because I am just not doing well at all, given everything that's happening. It's like this, I thought, once we got Trump out of there, we wouldn't have to be thinking about every day something new, but the legacy he left our country in lives on through this horrible Supreme Court. And earlier today, I was just listening to what she was talking about eugenics, and how this Dr. Sokar, what he did in terms of leaving a legacy of anti-abortion rhetoric that they are still using today. So I hope that you will send the recording out so that I can widely distribute it to my members as well. So thank you all for doing this.
Thanks, Catherine. You're welcome. Thanks for your comments, and people, you can join in with what Catherine said. You can come on and talk about your own concerns or ideas. Yana has joined. Thank you, Yana. I just saw that in the chat. Welcome. Anyone else want to talk about something we just saw or heard? Yana, do you want to speak?
Well, I'm just thrilled with the power of her ability and her wonderful, like you said, she doesn't have to take a pause or look at any notes. It was very riveting. I learned a lot. I would like to watch it again, and to join with her in the importance of what we have in front of us. We hold up half the sky. Well, that sky is, to me, feels like it's falling. And those of us that have been working for a while, trying to turn the tide, I think can relate to the beginning of her conversation this evening about the weight of, the injustices that are piling up. So we need one another, and I think the coalition needs to really have an umbrella that brings in. We have so many organizations in this country and in the states that are trying to do stuff, but they're all of them kind of separate. I hope that we can find a way to weave them together, because together in solidarity is the strength to turn the tide. And I want to work with every breath I have until I leave this planet, which, we never know when that's going to be, but I'm an elder now, considered an elder, and this is what I'm dedicated to joining with you to do.
Thank you, Yana. And I will say that one of the things that we are trying to do, and obviously we need more people to get the work done, is to form more collaborations and coalitions. Now, the ERA coalition, I think they're up to about 259 members, and we are a part of that. So that gives us some clout in that respect. We want to form more coalitions with more organizations, as we go forward. We're still pretty new, so, but that's one of our goals as well. So thank you.
I hope that we can reach out to the young Democrats throughout the country. They're very vital. And the youth, hi, Catherine, and the youth is very important because this is their future. And I hope we can facilitate bringing in those groups, with a very low membership, and with sending out some videos like this in order to encourage them to join with us.
That's one of our goals too. You must have read something that we wrote. Either that or we're on the same page. Whichever way it works, that's all right. So thank you. Okay, who else? I mean, that was a lot of information. So Janice, welcome.
Hi, we were on another meeting. It was interesting because someone from the DNC was talking, and they were talking about, issues and voting and whatever. Mm-hmm. But when I just came back here, I just heard the sense of urgency that she had. Right. And the things, I'm thinking about the march in Washington and all the things that are happening at once. And I do feel it's like so important just to, even if we just focus on these women's issues, I mean, and really phrase it as the women, the family, the guns and everything, perhaps we need to, again, through legislation or whatever we do, really focus on, the ERA, everything is going to be here in Washington. This is going to be a hot place. And this election at home is very important. So I appreciated your comment, Carol, on the shooting and the guns. And I think, again, her sense of urgency about what's happening to women in this country was great. So I think maybe some more position papers, and like you did before. And I think, again, having her perhaps in person in a venue, maybe we can get the club or something like that to invite other members of coalitions to join us.
Yeah, I like that idea. Yeah, it's interesting because you mentioned, legislation. If we can get our legislative group up and working, there's no reason why, if we want to, that we can't write legislation. We can't write a bill. And I would advocate that we do that. You know, we all have so many things that we want to do. And I know I do personally. And, you know, we need a couple things, obviously time, and we're still, you know, new kids on the block, and we need people to work with us to make these things happen. But, and the ERA, you know, I know they must be so frustrated because I get on those calls almost once a week, and they talk about the things they want to do, and they talk about, you know, SJ Res 1, I think is the, you know, if I have it right, and just getting that even voted on is like pulling teeth. But of course, I don't have to tell all of you because you're involved that anything you want to get done in the Senate is like pulling teeth right now. So yes, to what you said, those are things we need to do, undoubtedly. Absolutely. Catherine, hang on a minute. I want to see if there's anyone else, and then I'll go back around. No problem. We'll get back to you. Okay, who else would like to comment? Anyone that hasn't yet? I'd like to hear from some of you. If not, Donna?
Carol, this is Wendy. Carol, she was great. So it's nothing, what more can you say?
Well, it's not about her, it's about the issues, you know, to have a discussion about the things that we're concerned about. I mean, I agree, she covered everything, but if you have comments,
yeah.
You know, I know Donna had her hand up, if we let Donna go.
Mm-hmm.
And welcome, Wendy.
Hi, honey.
Was hoping we'd hear a little bit more about the status of the ERA, because last I heard we had enough states that had endorsed it, but Virginia was trying to withdraw their endorsement. I don't know if they can legally do that. There was also some talk about that a certain individual, all he had to do was sign it, and then it would be published and it would take effect. And what can we do to make that happen?
Well, let me respond to the two things you said, and if you have more, so I don't forget. As far as the individual going backwards, he resigned, or, you know, retired, or whatever he did. He's done. So there's a new person in the I think it's a Department of Justice, who just came on. Is that right, Wendy?
The archivist.
The archivist, thank you. Yeah. They got a new, I think it's an interim archivist who probably won't do very much. And that's important, but it doesn't necessarily have to make this happen. As far as the ratification of the ERA is already proposing that the ERA has happened in the sense that 38 states have ratified it. But nonetheless, in spite of that, Congress still has to do some motion of some sort to make it an actual amendment. So, you know, it's kind of confusing and convoluted at times, but there are bills in Congress. You know, the House has passed these bills, but the Senate, you know, has everything else, is just holding on because they can't get the votes. They don't have enough votes, as
Carol,
we well know.
Isn't one of the problems with it that they've got enough states, but they didn't get them within that 3-year or whatever that time period was that they placed on getting the state, which is why there's a reticence for some Congress people to vote.
Well, that might be true, but that's not even something that the ERA brings up at any of these meetings, which is interesting. It's more about, you know, getting it through Congress, getting it, I don't know, you might help me with the terminology, but getting it approved. You know, because we have the 38 states, and Don, I think it was you who also mentioned about Virginia wanting to back out. According to the ERA coalition, who's doing all the work, so this is not my personal opinion, they can't back out. So now, will there be lawsuits no matter what happens? Probably, because there always is. But that's some of the information. I hope I answered your questions that I'm aware of. You're welcome. Okay, Wendy, did you want to say something? I know I got Donna in on there, or you want to wait? I got Kathy Harrington, and then All right, you're holding on, Wendy? Okay,
I'm holding on.
all right, thank you. Kathy Harrington?
Yes, thank you. I also noticed that she talked about a third reconstruction.
Mhm.
And we know how when some words of that are spoken, how it's going to be difficult.
Mhm.
And when the reactions that are happening that are also already regressive to try to add on something more progressive, it's a lot of work. And we all have to just decide to put the time into it. But I also think from her words, we can't give up. And we need to just keep going. And this is why we need groups like this, because we can commiserate, if you want to say, or we can come together and get strength from each other. And so I think she was a wonderful speaker to have tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I want to go back to Catherine unless someone else has a question in the interim. You can always come back. Catherine, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to say, I just finished the book by Anita Hill called Believing, and it's called, she refers to this as gender violence, and I think we need to start using that term. This is gender violence. What is happening to women in this country is gender violence, and I have been saying that and using that with people, and they say, what? And then we have a conversation to look at how this is systemic in this country. You know, it's not just about abortion rights. It's about healthcare. It's not just about pay equity. I mean, there are, you know, minimum wage. It's about pay. So I think we need to start using this term more consciously, because that is what's happening in this country. So anyway, I just wanted to pass that along.
No, thank you. I just heard that term about a week ago. And, you know, they talked about gender violence, sex violence, you know, first time I heard it used that way. You know, speaking on that, I just wanted to comment. This is a topic that I have been writing about for years, literally. And it all has to do with gun violence. And I'd just like to just get a nod from any of you if you've even thought of it or read about it. But, you know, so often we use these generic terms or pronouns or whatever to describe, for example, mass shootings. You know, they'll talk about mental health. Here's my perfect example. And they talk about, well, you know, mental health, mental illness is an issue regarding, you know, gun violence. And my response is, if that was true, then why are 98% of the mass shootings being done by males? Mostly young white males, but not all, but nonetheless males, allowing for that 2%, that rare occasion where a woman is using a gun. I don't even know if that's a fact or not, but I do know that it's males. And I write it every chance I get. I've been writing it for years. I get a lot of pushback when I say it, but we have angry white males. There's a lot of information written about angry white males. And if we don't get to the root cause of the problem, and this goes with anything that we're talking about, then how are we ever going to fix it? You have to get to the root cause. Everything else is a Band-Aid. You know, yes, we don't need AR-15s on the streets. That's true. You know, there is mental illness, but it's not the driver. More people that are mentally ill get killed than do any kind of killings. Now, is that mental illness when somebody's shooting, you know, 20-some people? Of course, there's got to be something wrong with you. I mean, I guess there can be a lot of evil in the world, but that's just not normal. But I mean, has anyone talked about it, thought about it, read about it? The fact that it's males, I mean, it's rarely written about. And we don't want to say it. I don't know why we don't want to say it. I guess because white males are still running the country. That's my theory. But Kathy's saying yes. Thank you, Kathy. Yana? Yes.
This is just my intuition or my thinking on that, and I've thought a similar, Carol, for a long time. The testosterone rule of law of society, it's a man's world, and it's geared for. They're almost, in a psychological imagery, a deity. The god is male in this culture mostly, and so for the young youth, there, what is the step if you're 18 and let's say your parents kick you out at 18, or your parents say you go to college or you get a job or you're out, and they can't decide. There's no structure for all that high amped testosterone to be channeled. I don't know if 2 years of community service, 2 years of public service in some way, and I'm not saying the military necessarily, but there are the Peace Corps, there's Red Cross, any kind of service to the people or to the public for 2 years might be a program that other countries do use, and I think that's something that needs to be addressed or looked at, because it is all males. I mean, we can't count the one woman that might be deranged and shoot somebody. She's not in the league of the mass murders that are going on in this country and have amped up, 43% since they loosened up the AK-15 laws or whatever, the assault rifles laws. What you're saying, I think, is a subject that needs to be brought forward, and some kind of focus in order to save these kids. These are mostly young. I don't know the statistics on the age, but it appears to me that I know Sandy Hook, they were both under 18, I believe.
Well, a good majority are young. I mean, you can look up the statistics. They're out there. And let me just mention to you, you can look up angry males or angry white males or however you want to search it. There's been books written. There's a specific sociologist, Michael Kimmel, who writes all about it, who studied it, who created a master's program for it. But they're angry. They're angry because one of the reasons is because they feel like they're being left behind. Like all the minorities are taking over, and and a lot of these males individually feel like, nobody cares, nobody loves them, nobody wants to be bothered with them. Women aren't interested in them. You could go on, you go on and on and on. But if you read about it, you could even just search angry males and you'll find information. It's an epidemic. And I hear that there's some talk finally, because I know Trump shut it down, that the CDC should be doing research.
Yeah.
But they were told they weren't allowed. I don't know how many people are aware of that. So therefore, if that can get through, then the CDC should start doing some research real soon and real fast. So I know Catherine had her hand up, Catherine Carmichael. So, and then Kathleen, will come back to you. Catherine, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I really like this term of gender violence. It's one that has not, been said a lot in popular press, but it has been used in a lot of academic literature regarding gender discrimination in the country. I know a lot of my bachelor's had to do with studying gender discrimination in the communication major, and I wrote my thesis about it. So I really like the term of gender bias, and I think that academia is ready for it if we just have to shift it over to kind of popular understanding of that. And then also, I liked your point of highlighting that the vast majority of perpetrators of gun violence are men, and that actually is a big point. And I mean, yeah, I would, for all so many things are needed in order to tackle this crisis. You know, first of all, having gun control, and I'd like to remind y'all that tomorrow is a big day of action for pushing gun control, pushed by young students, you know, primarily high school students. They're organizing another walkout tomorrow to push for gun control legislation. But also
Catherine,
this
can I stop you for one quick second? It's sort of a pet peeve of mine. Rather than say gun control, you mean using the term gun safety goes a lot further. It doesn't shut people down. So it's just something that, you know, I wanted to share real quick. So sorry to interrupt.
Thank you. No worries. And then also the interesting point of, you know, people saying that this is all due to, you know, a mental health crisis, which, you know, yes, I agree that in order to be the perpetrator of a mass shooting, you know, something psychologically must be going on, but also that the mental health crises of these men who are conducting mass shootings is also connected to gender violence and their thoughts of this explicit sexism. You know, you look at people who are incels, you know, involuntary celibates, who literally shoot up schools because they think that no woman wants them, and they think that the world is so terrible for them as a young white man, and all this kind of delusions. And you see them joining these online really sexist incel groups that promote violence, and the kind of psychology that goes into having young men join those groups is really similar to the psychology that they've looked of young people joining groups like ISIS or other radical groups like that. So I think, you know, when we have conversations about mental health, I think it's really important to connect that to a mental health crisis is connected to a sexism crisis, and we need to address both at the same time. So I'm, you know, studied a little bit about it, and I would actually, if I can, invite a professor of mine to one of these meetings. A lot of his research has to do with gender bias and gender violence, so he could talk at this meeting and see what he thinks is important to bring forward, especially if we go forward and start to write legislation as a group. But I'm just very excited that this group is starting to talk about those things and bring them up.
Thank you. Thanks for your comments. Okay. Donna mentioned she has to go, and I guess she's gone. Okay. Kathleen Harrington, yeah, you wanted to say something? Oh, you're muted.
Yes,
there
thanks.
You go.
A couple of things. I have a son, and one of the things that people told me to read that knew about the growth of a brain of a teenager is that, especially with young males, the brain is underdeveloped. It's when, like, kids make stupid choices. While people with mental health, with the brain not developed, there needs to be studies of that, of the development of the brain. But I'm going to tell you that I live in Florida, and they have gun shows here where they sell guns in various convention halls and different places about every other week. And the ads run on the radio and TV. And guess what? 12 and under are admitted to the gun shows for free.
Wow.
So you go as an adult. So what are you doing? You take a 12-year-old boy, and especially one that's already having, you know, when you're in middle school, the starts of problems, of psychological problems and things are happening, and you put them in this environment where, you know, that they see, and guess what? You go to a gun show this week, you go to a gun show 6 months later. So there's a lot of cultural things that are going on. And I have to say, where I live right in here, a lot of people didn't hear about this, but 3 years ago, a young man was having trouble up north, and his mother was living here, and he was like 20 years old. And he walked into a bank of people he didn't know and killed five women. He killed women that were in, it was in the morning. And right now the trial's going on. And guess what? The people that sold him the gun, they can't remember what they said the day that incident happened. And of course, now they're trying to protect the people that sold the gun, because they're going to postpone the trial even more. And you know what happens as time goes on. So there's incidents of things you didn't, of young white males that you don't even hear on the news because they don't rank in others. But
Yeah.
there's a lot to be studied here.
Oh, a lot. There's a lot to talk about. You know, when I mentioned women and mental illness, I don't know if I finished my thought, but you know, if mental illness in and of itself was the issue, as, you know, Abbott tries to say and some others, then why is it that men are doing the shooting and not women? Because women have mental illness issues as well. So that doesn't hold water. That's where I was going with that. And Andrea commented, social media plays a major role in all the issues we're discussing. Absolutely, no doubt about it. It doesn't help in many cases. Everything is sensationalized in the news. And so, yeah, that's what people are saying. That's what people are thinking. So let me go to Wendy. Wendy, go ahead. Wendy, you're muted.
I posted an article from the New York Times that was entitled, "The Mental Health System Can't Stop Mass Shootings." And in it, they said something that just really capsulizes what we are talking about. And it says, and I'm gonna read it real quickly. I'm not gonna read the whole thing, just a couple sentences. It says, "What options did I have? It was clear to me that he did not have a psychiatric illness." He's talking about somebody who came in and shot up a place, that would justify involuntary hospitalization. But I was reluctant to release the man whose story echoed that of so many other mass shooters. He had been bullied, but he was not mentally ill. The psychiatrist responsible for his care would know how to treat delusions, paranoia, mania, suicidal impulses, self-injurious behaviors, auditory hallucinations, and catatonia. But there are no reliable cures for insecurity, resentment, entitlement, and hatred.
Good point, Wendy, because personality disorders are not treatable. And that's what most of those are. Yep. Yeah. And, you know, so often, and what you're relating to in the social media comment, that, you know, just because they write something, I mean, when I was an advisor at ASU, I had a kid have to write a paper for a class I was teaching. And honest to God, I was waiting for him to kill himself or somebody else the way he wrote the paper. And when I questioned him if he was okay and if he wanted to talk and he needed help, he's like, "No, I just like to write like that." That might have been a true statement. I'll never know. But it also could have been that he really felt that way. And I reported it, of course, but they couldn't do anything because he hadn't done anything. That's part of the problem. That's the way our laws are set up. So, and then we have a comment about look at suicide from Janice. And yeah, suicide is a big issue. I think it's worse in schools now for school age, you know, teenagers, basically worse than ever.
Well, look at women. They were talking about women and what's happening to us. Basically, we're concentrating on males. You're saying white males, but look at black males and what they've done. You know, it's interesting now that everybody's getting a little excited as a grandmother of 5 black men. White males are now the topic after so much that has been done to black males all along. But what I heard, one comment was from what's his Jay, who used to whatever, and he said, "Why don't we have an Emmett Till moment for these people? Because how could they said that basically turned the tide." And someone said, the guy said, "Because there's no body left when you're hit by one of those."
Oh, right.
And I kept thinking to myself, because these people seem callous. Ted Cruz, when I listened to him, he dehumanizes us.
Yeah.
he dehumanizes women. He dehumanizes minorities. He just, it's just really scary to me because I don't feel, and again, Andrea was talking about, do they feel like the characters, do they actually feel anything? I mean, I don't understand. It's just very, very hard right now.
Yeah. And I don't even know what to say to that because, some of these people that are out there, basically your Republican Congress, I mean, they don't even want to talk about it. It's been said that many of them don't comment at all. Nothing, good, bad, or indifferent. These are human factors. I mean, they should affect everybody and anybody. So not talking about it is not going to change anything. It's not going to push it under the rug. It's not going to go away. I mean, over the weekend alone, I think it was 6 or 8 states had mass shootings. Now, some of those I know it took notice, like Philly, especially because I'm from Philly originally, and Arizona. Some of them were like, at nightclubs, and South Street in Philadelphia is a big hangout, And interestingly enough, there's been cops on the corner in Philadelphia for years, because there is such a large crowd that goes down there. A lot of drinking goes on. It wasn't necessarily a gang fight, but it was a couple people getting into a fight, shooting guns, and it didn't matter who they shot in the interim. So there's certain ways and reasons that these things happen. And
10 mass shootings this past weekend.
Is that what it was? I knew the number had gone up.
I went to I looked online, 10
Thank you.
mass shootings, 3 people were killed, 14 were injured. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah. I think it was even a higher number than that because that alone in Philadelphia, it was 14 people, 3 killed and 11 injured. That's just Philly.
Yeah, there were more than at least 6 because there were 3 other people killed at another. But I don't know.
I'm sorry. It was 17 killed and 62 injured across the United States over the weekend.
But that's just the weekend.
That's just the weekend.
That's insane. I mean, we got a lot of things to worry about and work on, but I mean, that's one of the top ones. Yeah, Yana, go ahead.
Just when we say insane, and it is, we have these people like Ted Cruz that I think are psychopaths myself. When I think about having no conscience, they have no conscience, no compassion. I would say their hearts are shriveled and their souls are dead. I think it's a crime that they're in a position of leadership, because when you have 70% of the American people that have been polled agree that gun safety and responsibility is a good thing, and you have these people at the top that are crushing, maybe going to vote is much more difficult, and that's also a crime and a sin. But we have got to get these psychopathic cult followers out of office and out of the Supreme Court. And I think we need to appeal to Vice President Harris and let her know that we need her to spearhead the ERA, to spearhead the changes against gender violence. She is a woman in power. Maybe we can, as a group, maybe as a coalition, approach her with 10 pages of groups that are beseeching her to please step forward and be a leader on this.
Well, that's not a bad idea, because she did say when she was running as vice president that the ERA was going to be at the top of her list. And to my knowledge, it hasn't even been on the list. So that's a really good idea. I mean, if people wanted to step up and do that and send her a letter, like a really, almost like a white paper, I guess, in some sense. I think, it can't hurt. It can only help.
I'd like to send a letter or draft a letter with a few other women and maybe send it to Michele Goodwin to review before we send it off.
Yeah, well, then I mean, I'm sure she could change the whole letter. There's no doubt about that. And I have a theory on that. You could, a lot of times we write things, you can write things 10 different ways. There's not a perfect way. There's not only one way. So if you wanted to work on that, Yana, and if anybody else wants to work with Yana, why don't you put your email in the chat?
I did do
Did
so.
you do that?
Yes.
Okay. Is it further up? Was it a while ago, or I
Yeah,
missed?
I can put it up again. It's
Yeah,
easy.
why don't you do that since you just said that? And then if anybody wants to work with her, please reach out to her. And I hope there will be some people, because I think it's a good idea. And it's a good way to get information out, get our name out, and then do something that's worthwhile. Okay, I think we should probably wrap this up by 9. That's Eastern time. But if there's any other comments or questions, anybody?
What happened in North Carolina to Phyllis? Do you know how that went, or has it passed?
Yeah, I'll let Liz speak to that, because Liz was following that. Liz, you want to comment on that?
Hi. Yeah, Phyllis, actually, there were 5 people in the primary. And so Phyllis came in 3rd, but she was only, I was about maybe, I was only a few hundred, if that, votes less than the person who came in 2nd. But because it's Georgia and they have a runoff, the person who came in 1st did not make the 51, it wasn't 50 plus 1. So the 1st and the 2nd person are going to have the runoff.
Okay.
That's going to happen. So that was too bad, because she, I just, I certainly hope that she continues and stays into, running for office, because she certainly, would do an excellent job.
Yeah, it's a shame, but yeah, I think she'll still be around. I have no doubt about it.
Could we get Phyllis's contact information? Write
Yes,
her a note.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, sure.
I'd like to write Phyllis a note. It's Judy.
Sure. I can send that to you, Judy, if you'd like.
Yeah.
If anybody else.
Let's support her.
Yes, exactly.
We did support her, and now we need to support her, even again.
Well, we did write her an endorsement, so that was a good thing. And
I agree with you, Judy.
Yeah, some people did postcards to try to help her out. And I'm going to be talking to her about maybe joining our board, because she's been so active.
Okay.
So, but I'm sure she'd appreciate a note from anyone.
Anyone and everyone.
Yeah. Liz, did you contact her? I know you were going to email something.
I did the night before. I don't know if I'm on mute, but I didn't after.
Okay.
Because I was waiting to see if she was going to pull ahead, at all.
Yeah. She usually comes on these meetings. It's a shame she's not on. We could have told her how much we appreciated her.
So but, I just got her email right now, and I will put it in chat, since I may not have everybody's email.
Okay, thank you.
So.
And also we need to keep pushing for Val Demings, I think, since it's just, I think if we could just put a blast out, or.
Yeah, Wendy, we just talked to Wendy over the weekend. Wendy's going to write something, right, Wendy?
And I'm going to have it done by Wednesday.
Okay.
Because Rubio's got to go.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she was on the news today. Well, on a TV show. GMA comes on at noontime or 1 o'clock, and she was on there from Florida, because they're doing the Special Olympics, and she was speaking. I don't know if Catherine's saying she saw. Yeah, she was good. She's always good.
She is good, but I think since she's was one of our first, we need to follow her and continue to be visible.
Yeah, for sure.
The primary is in August, actually, too.
Yeah, it's a late
There's still
one.
time to the primary.
Yep. Okay, we're just a couple minutes out, so unless someone has anything, really critical that they want to
I
add.
just wanted you all to know that we had our president on the campaign trail this weekend, and I'll have to get some pictures of you at the group, and she attended a meet and greet, and we're going to get her active in getting a statehood and getting some more women elected. So we were out and about working and campaigning.
Yeah, for Anita Bonds, for those of you that were with us in October or know her.
Pictures for our Facebook page and our website.
There you go. Yeah, gotta love Anita. She's great. It was fun talking with her and the firemen and getting them riled up. I made them answer a question about mental health. I think they were avoiding me. And I love talking to Joe too. He's cool. I could talk to him for a while. But thank you for saying that. And yeah, listen, everybody.